Hey everyone, welcome back to Tacenda episode 9. Today we're going to be talking about the image of God. I'm Micah, this is Richie,
Hi.
and this is Graydon. So,
You need to say something great so they know who you are.
Hello.
alright, cool
Hi.
beans. So, we're kind of trying out a new way to do this week. And we're going to be talking philosophy. We're going to have a little bit of background to set up, and then we're going to have some discussion about what it means that we're created in the image of God. So this idea kind of sprung out of a conversation that me and Richie had, and we're like, I bet we could make this into a podcast. So, yeah. I guess we should lead off with what the Bible says on this topic, right? Genesis 1:26, so God created man in his own image. The Bible gives humankind a special place among God's creations. No other created being was made in the image of God, according to the Bible. So whatever this quality is, it's unique to humans, both male and female, as you see later in the verse. So God created men and women in his own image, and the fall then tarnished that image. We can all agree on these points. So let's digress a little further and get a little closer to this elusive definition. There's 3 categories of being, if you think about it. Beasts, humans, and angels, fallen or otherwise. Beasts have bodies, but no mind and no soul. Angels have soul and mind, but no bodies. Mankind has all 3, as well as a special charge from God to have dominion over beasts of the field, bird of the air, etc. The image of God can't be a body, even a human body, as God is a spirit and does not have a body. Even Christ was pre-incarnate at the time of creation. And animals, anyway, have a body. Yet the image of God cannot be a mind, as some animals such as horses and dogs possess something similar, and angels have the ability to reason. So what is the image of God? To find a clue, let's look at the ways that man is similar to God. We both have dominion. We both create, though man is a sub-creator, and we both have moral law. We also both have communion, God among himself as the Trinity, and man and woman with each other in marriage as a reflection of that communal love. So the image of God, perhaps, is the ways that we're like God. It's hard to put a finger on a specific quality, but we at least have a basic idea of what it's like. We'd like to open this up for some discussion among the guys. We have 3 big questions that we're going to talk about today, each about how knowing that we are created in the image of God affects our lives and behavior. So here's my first question, and I'll lead off with a quote. The 20th century British apologeticist C.S. Lewis once said, "It is a serious thing to live in the society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption, such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilization, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. Next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses." So, that was a lot of talking. Here's my actual question. How does the fact that we are made in the image of God influence how we treat others? Go.
Ooh. Go ahead.
So, by Christian standards, everyone is created equal. At least all humans, obviously, are created equal. So, by that standard, we are all created equal, and we are all similar in the way that we are all formed from the image of God, which in turn would present the case that we should treat others the way we would like to be treated, but even more than that, we should treat others the way that they deserve to be treated, which is a human, like
Right.
equal, everyone. Which is, I'm not going to start with the politics of today, but people have just taken that and went in the wrong direction.
Well, I'll build off of that and say that in today's culture, the value of humans, so the human value, has been very greatly diminished. It's been replaced with personal value, with social status, with even with pets. People they'll get a dog, they'll get cats, they'll get pets and stuff like that, which is fine. You can have those, but they'll get those.
Pets are sinful.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But if you get those in place of a child, if you're looking for something to please yourself, something to grow, to nourish, to build, to see their development, then you can't really do that with a pet. You really need to get married, have a child, or at least I'd say at least 3 children to really experience what life is. And I'm not saying that getting married and having children is for everyone. I think you mentioned that earlier today, Graydon. But I am saying if you have that desire and you put your career and all that in front of, having children. I know this is kind of swearing off the road of the topic, but I feel like humans, which are made in the image of God, have been greatly devalued, just in general, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I do think that something that I do appreciate about the way the culture is moving is that it is acknowledging that all people have value.
Right.
And so it's a step in the right direction.
Yes.
It can be taken wrongly, but I do think it's a good thing.
Yeah. We've moved at least from a nation of racism, segregation, sexism, all those isms, to a nation of you won't find a better place to live in the whole world. I mean, we are quite literally the best place to live, America, that is, if we have any listeners outside of this country. Anyway, America is the best country.
If we have any listeners outside of the country, just move here.
Yeah. Do it legally, though. I am technically a foreigner. I've migrated here. At least my mother has. So. Moving on.
We've been here for 200 years.
So. Random facts. But yes, did you want to dwell on that question more?
If you have more to talk about, we can dwell on it a little longer. But if not, we can move on to question 2.
I think I've said my piece with that question.
Cool. All right. Second question. How can we fail to reflect the image of God, both personally and among others? I think it might be best to think of this in 3 categories: personal, community, and civic.
Well, going from the personal stance, I'll start with the personal because I want to quote something later, but everyone's made in the image of God. We agree with that. Whether you sinned or not, whether you're saved or not, you're made in the image of God. Sorry, I completely blanked.
You're good.
Question again.
The question is, how do we fail to reflect the image of God?
Oh, yes.
Both personally and among others.
So there's, the true image of God is holiness. It's more than just having a mind and thinking for self and having that spiritual essence. Mm-hmm. Because we agree that animals don't have a spiritual essence. Mm-hmm. Angels can't, have a personal relationship with Jesus, but humans can. Only humans can have a personal relationship with God. Only humans can be saved, can be perfect through Jesus. Mm-hmm. So I think we fail to obtain the true image of God when we sin, when we reject Christ, when we go on our own path, decide to let us rule our lives rather than Jesus. Because what you're supposed to do when you get saved, you're supposed to let the old man die and Jesus come in and be the new man. So you're quite literally, Jesus is within you, and you are now, you now have literally the image of God within you, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So if the image of God is holiness, right?
The true full image of God.
Okay.
Because if you think about image of God, you look at God, and what do you see? You see a spirit who is perfect, who is holy.
Okay. So if the image of God is holiness,
Yeah.
and man is the only creature created in the image of God,
I had a question about
what
that.
then do we do with holy angels?
Yeah. So my question is, when you say reflect the image of God, are you saying like there is the holy and perfect image of God, what God is, but then there's also the part of the image of God that we were created in? And I don't think that we are holy. I think that we are. I'll get into this later, but I don't think holiness is the image that we're made in.
Okay.
I do believe, of course, that God is holy, and that to try and reflect that back onto Him, we should obviously not sin. And
Can we take a moment to define holy?
yes,
I would say
This feels
have
like
the
a whole
presence-
nother
have,
can of
have the
worms,
presence of God.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds pretty sound. I don't want any pastors in the comments fact checking me like you are now banished
Holy.
from the church.
holy. I mean, divine. I
Divine.
would think is the same,
Yeah.
Okay.
relatively the same, in the same ballpark.
I have something here from my pastor on the subject of angels, if I may read that.
Yeah.
His name is Father David Masterson. I call him Father David Masterson. But here's what he writes. You mentioned that angels have free will. Most theologians think that angels have free will to sin, but that the angels only. Most theologians think that angels have free will to sin, but that the holy angels do not choose to sin because they are under the influence of God in heaven and only do His will. In other words, angels have the capacity to sin, but choose only holiness because they have no sin nature that is seeking to lead them astray. And then he writes, since the Bible is silent on the subject, this statement is not biblical truth about angels, but speculation. So I do want to specify that before we continue. Most of this is just speculation. We're not saying this is true. We're just speculating. We're asking questions and discussing them. So what I'm understanding from here is that we're made in the image of God by getting a choice. You know, it's not necessarily 50-50 for the angels. You know, they're constantly in the presence of God. They're constantly working with Him. So they know, they may have seen His face. They know who He is, essentially. And we don't have that as direct feeling. I mean, we still have accessibility through Jesus, but we don't have the direct view, not until we get to heaven.
And they also don't have a sin nature,
Right.
like you said.
They don't have a tempter constantly trying to, pull them down with him, if that makes sense.
Keep in mind that Adam and Eve in the garden during the fall also did not have a sin nature,
True.
and yet they chose to sin.
But
They were also in
Right.
the presence of God, right? They walked with God.
but like he said, they don't have a tempter. Angels don't really have something trying to pull them down all the time, especially if they're in heaven all the time, among the presence of God. I mean, I doubt that fallen angels are in heaven. So
yeah, I do think. Well,
Because
it does say in Job
Satan was cast down to earth, so he's no longer in heaven.
but he still has
Yes.
communication with God.
True, because right.
it said in Job that
Yeah.
God summoned everyone together.
And then your mom was talking about how in the end days Satan will judge us, and that will be I don't know if that will be in heaven, but
Hold
Satan
on.
will judge us.
that's what she had said. I had never heard that before, but
I don't remember
she
her
said
saying this. Or
Satan can't judge us
Yeah.
because he's not the maker of moral law.
I don't know if that's just what she said.
All right, that's cool.
Maybe I misunderstood.
So what are you saying about this? No sin nature in the presence of God. Something about a choice?
So
and this is related to what the image of God is.
Yeah, right. So let me quote directly from what my pastor said.
All right.
Hold on one second. The notion of the image of God in man has been understood to mean that man is created with a moral, spiritual, and intellectual nature patterned after God that sets him apart from the rest of creation. Humans mirror God's divinity in their ability to actualize the unique qualities of reason, creative freedom, a possibility for actualization, and the ability for self-transcendence. Like the angels, who, as Saint Isaac the Syrian puts it, were created in silence, man was not formed by a divine command addressed to the earth. God did not command the earth to bring forth man as he did when he created the grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, etc. But rather, God said, "Let us make man according to our own image and likeness." All of man.
Personal.
Sorry?
This is a personal act.
Correct. All of mankind, however, as exemplified in Adam, was led astray by deception. Man deliberately drew upon himself that catastrophe which all mortals now share. So, the image that had been made by God is now distorted by sin. Although the image of God is distorted by sin, it is never destroyed. The image resides in man insofar as he has an intellect and a will in his very nature. No matter how much man may sin, this image will always remain. In the funeral service we hear, "I am the image of thy glory ineffable, though I bear the brands of transgressions." So that's just a little part of what he sent me. But I think that kind of almost sums up our confusion about the angels and how my argument of like we have fallen. So we no longer have that direct connection to God. We can no longer talk to God and walk with God in the garden like we used to be able to.
Mhm.
You'll see examples of really close connections to God, like when Noah walked with God, or like
Enoch.
Enoch.
I mean,
Enoch was
yeah,
walked
Noah
with God
and
and
Enoch.
was not
one-
found.
yeah.
because
Noah
God
and
took him.
Enoch,
Right.
multiple other people.
Yeah.
And they're close relationship with God, but it was much harder now because we have fallen. We have to now from being perfect, now being the perfect image of God, we're now fallen, and now we are an imperfect version, and only through Jesus we are then perfected. So it's not necessarily the outside that has been broken, and I'm sure we have similar physical. I want to be careful when I say this. I'm sure God has. When we look at images, we look with our physical eyes, and I'm sure when we get to heaven, we'll still have our physical eyes, and we'll be able to see things. And God said He would create a new world. After like 1,000 years,
Yeah,
He
1,000-year reign.
would destroy
That
the
gets
earth.
into premillennialism
Yeah,
and postmillennialism,
yeah, exactly.
all that. But
At a certain point,
new heavens and new earth.
yeah, there will be a physical earth again.
And also new bodies.
Right.
Yes.
So we will have a physical body again. So maybe it's like we are physical bodies. Maybe God has, in some ways, Jesus was a man. That was his physical part. Maybe Jesus will be the physical part of God. So I don't know exactly on those lines, but I'm sure the way we think, the way our mind works, was designed after him, and the way our spirit works, the way our spirit properly works, was designed after him.
Mm-hmm.
But since we've fallen, it no longer properly works. Your
So,
opinions?
That's kind of how we failed by nature, right? How sin has corrupted our nature, and we've failed to reflect the image of God in that way.
Mm-hmm.
As like a community, in a community, how can a person fail to reflect the image of God?
Not caring for their community. I mean,
All right.
Really just being distanced from that community to the point where you're sort of isolated. I mean, church is there. Like, people now, after COVID, they will stay home and watch online services,
Mhm.
and that's good and all. You're supposed to hear the word, but church is more for the community and you being around other Christians. It's not just about going there to learn about God. It's to you be there and worship and fellowship with others like you, and that can like help you when you're struggling. And so to fail in a community would be to not use that community to its full ability. If you're struggling, don't stay isolated. Ask people for help. Be in that helpful mindset of like, don't be prideful, essentially. Like, ask people for help if you're struggling. But yeah, to fail in a community would be to not use your community of Christians to the ability of that you could have.
I think that's part of the reason why Christ instituted the church, right? Common wisdom tells us that like you become like your friends, you become who you surround yourself with. And so part of the reason that Christ created the church was to surround ourselves with a community of believers who are pushing us to virtue. I like that. As beyond the church, like in a community of, I don't know, like at school or at work, how can we fail to reflect the image of God?
How can we fail? Well,
a lot of it could have to do with that C.S. Lewis quote.
Right. I mean, we have certain virtues as Christians. We have to meet those virtues. I'm not saying we should have a checklist. You should never really have a checklist. Those are helpful. But everyone shows. I think love is probably the biggest deal. You need to show love. I don't know how you show love. Everybody shows love in a different way. Whether it's making sure this person is okay, calling them, giving them text, or preparing meals for them when they're really busy, or just doing something for them when they can't do it. I think that's one way. If we fail to do those certain virtues and we constantly commit, the 7 deadly sins, I think that's a big indicator. If you commit one of those 7 deadly sins. Now, I have an article here from Focus on the Family, and this will be in the description. It's titled "What It Means to Be Made in the Image of God," and there's a little portion I just wanted to read. Quote, "Every single human being, no matter how much the image of God is marred by sin, or illness, or weakness, or age, or any other disability, still has the status of being in God's image, and therefore must be treated with the dignity and respect that is due to God's image bearer. This has profound implications for our conduct toward others. It means that people of every race deserve equal dignity and rights. It means the elderly people and children yet unborn deserve full protection and honor as human beings." And that comes from Systematic Theology, page 450. A select portion of that quote right there. I think what that shows is if you don't respect people as humans, if you don't show them the care and love you show to yourself as you were meeting, then you really don't, as you were saying, you really don't respect them as an image bearer. You put them below yourself, and it comes down to pride and love.
Yeah, just to bounce off what you were saying, I think to fail in a community like that, not a community of Christians, but at work or school, if you don't show love, then you failed. Because God is love. And if you're not showing love, then you failed. Essentially, I don't think there's anything else
as
to
an
that.
Image bearer,
as an image bearer,
his...
if you're not showing love to everyone around you, you're failing.
Which is a pretty high...
it is.
Pretty high
It is. That's true. That's true.
So, I know we mentioned talking about how we can reflect the image of God, or how we fail to reflect the image of God in the state, like in the country as a whole. Not to get into too much, I don't know, political theology here. I don't know the term, but just super quickly, how can we reflect God's image as members of any nation, not just
don't
America?
Separate yourself from political groups, like how you've got Republican and Democrat, and then super Republicans do not associate themselves with Democrats, and they're like, these people, I will never speak to these people, I can't be friends with these people. And people have different political beliefs, but you can't judge people. You shouldn't judge people for that. And like I was saying, it's one of the hardest things to do. But if you're not doing it, you're failing to reflect the image of God. And if you're not loving everyone the same way, and even then, like just loving everyone alone, that's almost impossible to do, especially with our concept of love. And we can't even understand unconditional love. We know the meaning, like unconditional love everlasting. It can never be broken, but it's one of the hardest things that like to possibly do is to love everyone. But it's what we should strive for as a Christian. And so I think if you're segregating yourself from people because of your political beliefs, or you're treating others, not racism, just anybody else differently,
Any form of hatred.
yeah,
Yes.
any form of hatred, or like showing, not necessarily hating a person, but raising somebody else up instead of these people, right? So you're not putting people down, but you're just raising this other group up.
Right.
Putting something.
Yeah.
And that's what
In the
humility
place of
really
that.
is.
Or yourself. That's
Exactly.
another thing. If you're raising yourself up, that your group, the group that you're a part of, and even if you're not hating on other people, then you're failing.
Yeah, well, two things you just mentioned. I don't want to get too far off topic, but humility is, a lot of people think that humility is, oh, think of yourself less. No. You have your talents. God gave you talents. We know that. Be confident in those talents. But think of other people more. Or think of them even just as much as you do of yourself. Even if you think of other people just as much as you do of yourself, holy cow, that was a statement, then you're going to have an easy life, and you're going to be a nice person. You know, you're going to be not a lovable person, but you're going to be a loving person.
Yeah.
And then
I wouldn't say you'd have an easy life.
yeah,
but,
right, not an easy life, but you'll have a morally correct life.
You'll have a satisfying life.
Yeah, and then, yeah, right.
You'll be very.
And then the second thing is what you were saying. It starts off with, Republicans and Democrats, and I don't remember I think it was Whigs and another party way back in Washington's day.
Federalists.
Yeah. And it started out with them too, and then after Washington left, everything started to go boom, 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 and you got further and further apart, and now you have the far right, and now you have the far left, and
People don't just separate themselves into two camps. They're like,
right.
I'm a true Republican, or I'm a true Democrat.
Now thankfully, it hasn't gotten to the point where we hate each other to the point where we don't think of each other as humans. Thankfully, our government is not that extreme yet, and I hope it never gets there. I'm just saying that.
Society.
Yeah, right.
The media is trying to portray that as such.
And thankfully, it hasn't gone that far. But some far right people do this, and same on the left. They'll look on the other side, the far left side. If you're looking from the far right to the far left, you'll some people will say like, oh, they're not American citizens. They're not true Americans. And it's same vice versa. Some far leftists will say to the far right that, oh, you're not true Americans, because they have different moral values. Mm-hmm. That hopefully, but if you look at how the Roman government demised, but they took that to a personal level and started to ignore that their fellow Americans or Romans were made in the image of God, and ignore that fact, and that's how violence began, and how Rome basically killed itself, at least one of its ways.
So, taking all of that together, how can we live day to day as good image bearers of God? Not like, you don't have to change the world.
Yeah.
But how can you take the next step?
I think it's the same. I'm just going to give the same answer. I'm going to keep repeating it. It's just
love.
That's
cool. It's a good answer.
Love is, what's the song? It's Spy for King and Country. And he reads during the middle of the song, during the peak of the, it's a music video. Well, it doesn't matter. It's in the song. But during the peak where the action is the highest and like tensions are the highest, he reads a verse from the Bible, and I don't have the verse on me, and I don't want to say it because I don't want to misquote it. But it speaks about if you don't have love, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And
Clashing Gong. Or...
yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's just what I believe.
Let me read
About
another
that.
personal quote. Let me read another quote from my pastor, just to summarize how you can daily and personally apply the image of God, the true image of God, to yourself. Sorry, I need to really get some tissues so that I can blow my nose between breaks. If you recognize your personal mission as being a means towards bringing others to that image, that likeness of God, are you yielding yourselves to Christ's influence, to his presence, and to his activity? In other words, are you living accordingly? God has created all men with a basic drive towards union with him. God has implanted in every man the desire for God, the image that will only be satisfied by becoming born-again sons of God. Let us not slumber nor sleep, but let us daily conform our lives to Jesus, that he might transform us into his image and likeness. Now, it's a completely different, we could do a whole other podcast on what it means to daily conform. And if you want more information on that, just let us know in the comments. Not that anybody's going to be commenting anyway, but we'll get a few comments eventually.
Thank you, Drew, for commenting last time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a different story. And daily conforming, just to simply go over that, is praying, is
becoming more like Christ.
Yeah, becoming more like Christ.
So, I guess to summarize, the image of God is such a vast and deep topic that we couldn't possibly cover it on a single podcast episode, or even a podcast in general. But if you want to learn more, check out some of the resources that we have linked in the description, or drop us a question in the comments. If you liked what you heard and want some more rants, conversations, and musings, feel free to subscribe to our channel.
And
as always,
we have a Spotify.
Yes,
we do have a Spotify.
We do.
Which you can watch and listen to it. So you can choose either one.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat.
Before we go, we didn't do a Bible verse of the day. I know we had a couple in there, but that was more for the thing. I have the Bible verse here, if you want to read that as our Bible verse for the day. Okay, so this is 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the language of men and angels, but I do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith to say to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't love, I am nothing. If I give all of my possessions to the poor, and I give my body over to hardship so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. It always protects, it always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. And that's 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 8.
Excellent. As always, thanks for watching.
Finger guns.
Finger guns.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap.
All right.